to another video. In this one we'll be going through how you would solve a problem in Python, well, in any language, but more specifically we'll be going over how you would crack a problem and some tips for problem solving. If you're finding it hard to finish a project, simple or hard, or if you're finding it really hard to figure out how to implement a piece of code, then this video will help you, and I'll be first teaching you some easy tips for problem solving, and then I'll try to I'll try to implement that in an actual project. So let's get right to it. Before we start, we need to break down a problem. A project, sorry. So we need to break it down to three components. We need to break it down to its three components, which is the input, the algorithm, I'll keep it short for algo, and the output. So the input is basically what we give to our program to manipulate. So we can have no inputs, and sometimes we can have inputs. So for example, let's say if we want to make a basic program that makes all of our whole string uppercase without using the dot upper, we would use the string as an input. So input is what we give to our program, and then algo. So the algorithm is what we do to the input. So let's say we get a string, and what we want to do is loop over that string, and each time we loop it we want to make it uppercase, so that would be an algorithm. So algorithm is the component where we edit the input so we can make sure we can output it in the right way. So it's the actual meat of the code basically, and output would be the final answer. So it would be a final result where we would have outputted all of our uppercase string. So this would be let's take an example which was we taking a string and we want to uppercase it rather than doing dot upper on the whole thing. So what would be our input would be a string. So let's say our string was hello there, then we will take that string and that will be an input, and then we'll use that hello there string and do some manipulation or do stuff to it to be ready to result it, and once it's ready we can output it somehow, and that will be our end of our code. So one concept in Python that really helps you to do this is actually called a function. So if I make a simple function called message, and I'll just do I'll do message, and I'll just write string here, and I'll just return string, and I'll just call this function by doing print message. Let's do hello there. Let's run this program, and we get hello there. So this is a really basic example of a project, really basic. It's literally just 3 lines. So our input would be actually a parameters, because this def message wouldn't be an input. This def message is declaring a function. So these two words are just declaring a function. This actually declares it, and this is what we give the name. But the parameters is where we give our inputs, and where we can feed our inputs are from where we call it. So here's where we call it, and this gets feeded into string, and then with string we can use string inside of the function, and we can manipulate however we want it. And if you see we can't call string outside of the function, it'll come up with an error saying string is not defined at line 12, which is right here. So with functions is really specific. You can only use the input within the function. So that's great if you want to keep your code tidy and prevent collisions. I'm not going to really go into what collisions are, but that's our input aspect. We don't really have an algorithm aspect, well we do, but the algorithm aspect is tied in with the output. So what outputs our data, our end result is this return. This return allows us to output our input. So our algorithm variable. So it could be anything. We can return string. We can return string.upper. We can return string.title, and this part will be the algorithm. But a longer algorithm would be something like splitting up each word. So what we can do is we can make a list called, I'm just going to make a list called lst, short for list, and then do for I in string. We do list.append I, and then we'll do return list. And now we have a bigger function, and this part is the algorithm. So what we're doing here is we create a variable called list, and each letter of the message gets appended to the list, and then we return it in the output. And when we call this, we get a list, and it contains every single word, even the empty space here. So we can also do it where it's dot upper and run it, and it'll be all of these letters will be uppercase. So this is a really basic way of trying to narrow down a problem, because the first step is to a project is to try to section it out to smaller pieces, because if you try to tackle the project as a big as like one at a time, or like if you try to tackle the project at one, then you'll find it difficult and you might find it overwhelming. But if you split up to maybe components, like components of 5, or maybe even just doing the input algorithm and output sections, components of 3, then you'll find it way easier, because now you're dealing with smaller and easier sections rather than doing one big and overwhelming project. And once you've done them smaller and smaller sections, it'll all build up, and then once all those small sections are done, you're pretty much done with your project, and you'll find it way more easier, and it'll probably take you quicker actually, rather than longer. So this was a brief introduction to input, algo, and output, but I want to give you an actual example, and I'm going to delete all of this apart from line 1 to 5 actually. So I'm going to delete from line 5 onwards, and I'm gonna go to Google Chrome and pull up this website called Code Wars. This is a great way to find amazing projects you can do, and I've chosen Python here. You can choose any language like JavaScript, C, or even SQL, which is cool. So what it's telling us here is you are given a word, so it wants us to take a string as an input. So this is indicating we want a string as an input. Your job is to return the middle character of the word. So we now know the output. We know that our input and output. Our input is a string, and the output should be the middle word, the middle letters of the word, sorry, or characters. If the word length is odd, it return the middle character. If the word length is even, return 2 characters. So we're getting some rules here, so we need to make sure we return it properly. So it gives us some examples here. So if our input was test, we want to get the 2 characters in the middle, es, since it's an even number. If our input is testing, we want to make sure t is the output, since t is middle here. And it also gives us that input and output here, but it doesn't give us that algorithm, because the algorithm is the part we want to work on mostly. And you can also section out your algorithm if you want by just sectioning it out to smaller pieces, like maybe an if statement section, and then there's another section, or like components. So let's look at this. It gives us even more examples, and then it tells us to write our code here. I'm not going to write my code here. I'm going to actually copy and paste this and write in VS Code, and as I find it easier. And once I've done with the code, I'm just going to copy and paste it and put it back here. So before I do anything, I'm going to run past to this, and I'm going to call this function, so whenever I want to test it, I can call it. And what I want to do is actually make a quick comment of what I need to do is basically input is a string, algorithm is the middle of the string, and then output is the middle of the string. This should be getting the middle of the string, and then we output the from the algorithm. So what we can do is actually give it a string. So let's do one word. So banana. So we know that BANANA, this is a even number, so what should be returned is N and A. So how would we do this as a human? Well, what we would do is first figure out the length, because knowing the length of the string is key, because then we know if it's an even number or an odd number. And we can do that easily by, let's make a variable. So we can make a variable called length is equal to len s. So we've figured out the length of the string, and we can test it by doing return length. Let's run this, and we get 6, and we know this is true because banana is 6 characters. So we've started off with length. Now we need to see what we do next, and we need to figure out if banana is an even and odd number. Well, sorry, the length of banana is even or odd. Although we figured out the length, we need to use the length to figure out if it's even or odd, because we need to tell the computer if it's even or odd. And how we can do that is actually using the modulus operator. So if you're not aware of modulus, it gives you a remainder. So we can do if length modulus 2, we can bracket this out, is equal to 0, print, actually we'll just do a return, this is even, else return this, this is odd. And I'm just gonna get rid of this return statement for now. And now let's test if banana is even or not. We'll run this, and it says this is even, this is true. Let's do testing, which we know is odd. So we run this, and it says this is odd. And so far, we've slowly built up components of our algorithm by thinking of how we would solve this. So we figured out the length of the string, we figured out if it's even or odd. Now what we need to do is, using the length of the string, if it's odd, what we need to do is basically go to the center of the, we need to get the center of the string. And how we can do that is, first, how we could do that. So if it's an odd letter, so let's look at this: 1 2 3 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, 7 letters, and therefore we know it's 7 letters. Sorry, but we want the T. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we can do actually is do the length. Okay, so we can do the length, divide that by 2, and then round that up, because I believe if you always round it up, you'll get the letter you're looking for. So what we can do is index, we can make a variable called index is equal to letter divided by 2, and what we can do is we need to do math.ceiling, I believe, actually. So what we need to do is import math, and instead of letter it should be length, and then what we need to do is math.ceiling, I believe. Hold up. Seal, yeah, math.seal, and what we'll do is return s and then the index, and see if it works or if it doesn't work. Okay, so we've got the index. Let's return this and see what we get, and we get I, and why this is incorrect is if we look at this, this is clearly not the center letter. This is one after the center letter, and if we think of how Python works, is because Python starts counting from 0. So technically this T is 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Although this is 4 characters, so 1, 2, 3, 4, Python starts from 0, so this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's catching the I, and where it should be catching the T. So how we fix this is we make it start from counting 0, but that would be harder. So what we can do is we can do index minus 1, and then that will shift you 1 back, and therefore we start from counting 0. And if we run this, we get T. We run this one more time, we get T, and that's the correct middle character. Let's try this with another word. I'm pretty sure apple is an odd numbered word, so let's run this and we get P. Let's try it with apples, and we run this and we get this is even because we haven't coded the even part. Let me clear this, and let's do it one more time, and we'll do it with pineapple, and this is odd, so PINE 4 5, so it should be, I'm pretty sure A should be returned. Yeah, A should be returned. So we run this and we get A. So we know it's working every time with the odd numbers. We've managed to make an algorithm where it works for the odd numbers. Now we need to make sure it works for the even numbers, and we need to think about it. So let's get an even number here. We'll get test because it's easy. It's 4 letters. So let's think how a human would think first, and then implement it as how a computer would understand it. So we got the length, which is 4, so the length here would be 4, and we know, actually let me get a longer string. I think banana was even. Yeah, that's even. So we got 6. So we know the 2 middle characters here would be N and A. So what we would do is 6 divided by 3, but we would also count the next one, because if we do 6 divided by 3, it will be 1, 2, 3, and N is part of our middle characters, but we also need to include A, so we need to have 2 indexes, 6, 3, so basically length divided by 2 and length divided by 2 plus 1, if that makes sense. So let's implement that quickly. We can do index is equal to length divided by 2, and then what we can do is actually middle is equal to s length plus s. Actually, if we do a plus operator, it will make an error. I'll show you why. Actually, no, it wouldn't make an error. It wouldn't. So if you s length plus 1, because if you remember, we do want the n, but we want what's after n, which is a, so we do length plus 1, and then what we can do is return middle. And let's run this program. String, oh wait, yeah, sorry, it should be index rather than length, so this should be index rather than length. And yeah, let's run this. And we get string indices must be integers. So string indices must be integers. I think what's happening here is, let's try this quickly. See if this works, and yeah, it doesn't, so it must be something wrong with this. So let's get rid of this index and run this, and yeah, it still does that. So we see what I did here. Line 15, which is here, so string indices must be integers. Clear. Index is legitimately equal to this, but length is a string. Length is a integer. So integer divided by 2. So 6 divided, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Middle is equal to s, and then it's 3. So I'm not sure why that's failing on us. Let's do 3, and let's do 3 plus 1. Run, and it's giving us an. But let's put the indexes back, and it's giving us an error. Why it's giving us this error, I'm not sure. I think I know why actually. Let me return index and comment this out. Run, and yeah, exactly. Okay, I figured it out. So what's wrong happening here is index is actually a float. So since index is a float, we can't really get the placement of s using a float number, because we only can get the placement of s using a integer. So what we need to do is do in and then bracket this off, and now try it, and it should work. Instead of that, we do middle. Let's run this, and we get an, which is working. So let's look at this. B-A-N-A-N. Well, this is not a great example because we got a recurring word. So let's try 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Yeah, so this is 8 characters long. Let's clear this, and we run this. If it does decide to run, and we get AD. So okay, so AD is clearly not the center of the string, but remember what I said, Python starts to count from 0. So what we need to do is actually minus 1 from this, minus 1, and instead of doing index plus 1 minus 1, we can just do index, because plus 1 and minus 1 cancels out, so we can just do index, and we clear, we run this, and we get CA, and CA is actually the center of the string. So we've pretty much completed the project, but I want to recap it quickly. So we get a input, which is the string. As I said, we need an input. The input is fairly simple, it's one parameter, and after getting the input we want to get the length of the string. So that's because we want to figure out how long the string is, and then we can use the length of the string to test if it's odd or even. And once we know if it's odd or even, we know it needs 1 or 2 characters. So once we figure out it's odd or even, we go over to even, and then we figure out the index we need to extract from, which is halfway. So halfway of the length is just doing length divided by 2, and doing this we can get half of the we can get the index at half of the string. But there's a catch here. Since Python starts counts from 0, we need to subtract everything by 1, and since we subtracted by 1, now we get the proper placement and we can just return middle. And the same could be said at index, but the reason we did math.ceiling, because if we do a odd number divided by 2, we get a decimal, which would be a 7-lettered word, a word with 7 characters divided by 2 would be 3.5. Then what we need to do is pretty much round it up, which would be 4. And once we've got 4, we need to return the placement of the character, if that makes sense. So let's try this out with avocado again. We'll run this, we get CA. Let's try it with let's try with, this is an odd word, so this should give us Z. And what we can do now actually is, since we've done the project, we can copy and paste this whole code, Control C. We can go to Code Wars and we can put it in here, and this is the algorithm right now. And what we can do is test and attempt. So let's test it, and everything, well, only one thing has came, math. Oh, hold up, yeah, we've got an error here, and that's because we forgot to import math, and we just need to import math up here, and we're good. Let's test, and it's passed all of our tests, so 5 out of 5, but it still doesn't mean we've done it correctly. What we need to do is click attempt. Once we've clicked attempt, it goes through even more tests, and it's passed all of these tests. And what's happened here is we've done our algorithm, project correctly. It was fairly small, but for you, you may be doing bigger projects, so you may want to section it out even more. And once you've done this, you click submit. And what's great about Code Wars is once you click submit, you can see all the people's examples. So let's wait for it to submit, saying submitting your final solutions here. Here one more time. Okay, so we can see some statistics on the top saying how many people were satisfied, how many people were able to complete this challenge, and who created the challenge. So you can see a really easy way of doing it right here. We're not expecting like people to do it like this every time, but you can obviously do it really quickly, and there's other methods that allow you to, functions that allow you to do it quickly, like div mod, and then you can return like this. but usually it's like this, really planned out with the proper algorithms and proper input and outputs, rather than doing it in just one line, which is possible. You can do it with one line if it's possible, but if this confuses you, it's also acceptable to do it with more than one lines, but you section it out. So that was the video. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have, make sure to subscribe and like. If you got any questions, comment them down below, and I'll see you in the next one.